You are what you do, not what you say you'll do. Carl Jung have. You ever felt invisible, even when people smile at you? Have you ever left a room and felt like the atmosphere shifted, but no one said a word? There's something happening in those quiet moments that you might not even notice. A presence, an energy, something that draws people in, even when you're convinced you're not worth the attention. Picture this: you're standing in line at a coffee shop, lost in your own thoughts, completely unaware that the person behind you has been stealing glances. You order your usual drink, exchange a brief smile with the barista, and walk away. What you don't see is how that simple interaction left an impression that will linger in their minds for hours. And here's what most people don't understand. Many of us are most attractive when we do nothing at all, when we stop trying, when we simply exist in our own quiet truth. If you've ever wondered why people seem drawn to you in ways you can't explain, or why you feel like there's something about you that others see but you can't, this is for you. Because today, we're going to explore the kind of attraction that no one teaches you about. The kind that lives in your unconscious presence, in the way you breathe life into a room without saying a word. The kind that Jung understood comes from the depths of our authentic being, not from the surface performance we've been taught to perfect. There is a form of attraction that goes beyond what we've been taught to value. It's not in the mirror. It's not in the compliments. It's not even in the way others look at you. It's in the unconscious aura you radiate, especially when you're doubting yourself the most. Jung understood something profound about human magnetism. He knew that our deepest appeal often comes from the parts of ourselves we've learned to hide. The sensitivity we've been told is too much. The depth others have called intense. The quiet strength we've been convinced is weakness. Think about the most magnetic people you've ever encountered. I'm not talking about celebrities or Instagram influencers. I'm talking about that teacher who made you feel seen with just a look. That friend who could sit with you in your darkest moments without trying to fix anything. That stranger who asked how you were and actually waited for an honest answer. What made them magnetic wasn't their perfection. It was their presence. It was the way they seemed comfortable with both light and shadow, both joy and sorrow. It was their capacity to be human without apology. Today, you'll discover that power by recognizing the seemingly small signs that reveal it. These aren't grand gestures or obvious signals. They're whispers, subtle shifts in how the world responds to you. The way conversations change when you enter them. The way silence becomes comfortable instead of awkward. The way people remember you long after you've forgotten the interaction. And here's what makes this so beautiful. You don't need to change anything about yourself to access this attraction. You don't need to become more confident, more outgoing, or more anything. You just need to recognize what's already there. Because the truth is, your presence has been speaking all along. The question is, are you ready to listen? Are you ready to see yourself through the eyes of Jung's wisdom as a complete being whose very existence creates ripples in the world around you? Let me share 6 unconscious expressions of your deep attractiveness, signs that reveal the magnetic person you already are, seen through Jung's understanding of the human psyche. First expression, the mirror effect. Others act differently around you. You've probably noticed it, haven't you? People change when you're near. They become more thoughtful, more careful with their words, sometimes more nervous, sometimes more genuine. They might speak more softly or find themselves sharing things they hadn't planned to reveal. Jung would call this the mirror archetype at work. You unconsciously invite others to look at themselves more deeply, and that can be unsettling for them. Your presence doesn't just fill space, it creates space. Space for truth, Space for vulnerability. Space for the kind of authentic interaction that most people crave but rarely experience. Think of Sarah, a quiet librarian, who always wondered why colleagues seemed to confess their deepest thoughts to her during lunch breaks. She thought she was unremarkable, invisible even, but what she didn't realize was that her calm presence created a safe harbor in the storm of their busy lives. People felt seen around her in a way that was both comforting and confronting. When the office gossip sat across from Sarah, she found herself speaking more thoughtfully, less harshly about others. When the ambitious manager shared a table with her, he found himself admitting his insecurities about living up to expectations. When the new intern felt overwhelmed, she naturally gravitated towards Sarah's desk for the kind of wordless support that only authentic presence can provide. This isn't about being a therapist or a counselor. It's about possessing a natural depth that calls to the depth in others. When people act differently around you, it's because you're activating something real in them. You're reminding them of who they are beneath their daily masks. Notice when conversations shift when you join them. Pay attention to how people's energy changes in your presence. Do they speak more slowly? Do they make more eye contact? Do they seem to search for deeper words? This is your unconscious influence at work. Second expression, the boundary paradox. You're often misunderstood as cold or unapproachable. Here's something Jung knew well. Depth can be intimidating. When you don't manipulate conversations or perform niceness, when you simply exist in your authentic state, it can create a kind of attractive tension. You're not trying to win anyone over, and paradoxically, that becomes irresistible. People might call you aloof, but what they're really experiencing is someone who doesn't need their approval to exist. That's rare, and rarity creates magnetism. The shadow side of our culture teaches us that we must always be available, always smiling, always on. We're expected to be emotional cheerleaders, constantly reassuring others of their worth while diminishing our own. But your refusal to perform this exhausting dance creates a space where real connection becomes possible. When you don't rush to fill every silence with empty pleasantries, when you don't immediately agree with everything someone says just to keep them comfortable, when you maintain your own emotional center regardless of the energy around you, this can be misinterpreted as coldness, but it's actually warmth at its deepest level. It's the warmth of someone who trusts others enough to be real with them. Have you ever been told you seem standoffish when you were simply being yourself? Have people described you as hard to read when you thought you were being perfectly clear? That's not a flaw. That's your boundaries creating intrigue. That's your refusal to be superficial, inviting others into something deeper. Third expression, the recognition glance. Others look at you. More than once, but don't approach. This is the look of recognition without understanding. People sense something in you, a peace mixed with depth, a stillness that suggests hidden currents. You know this feeling, don't you? You catch someone's eye across a room, and instead of looking away, they hold your gaze for just a moment longer than necessary. Or you notice someone glance at you, look away, then look back again, as if trying to solve a puzzle they can't quite name. Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, that shared pool of human experience where archetypes live. When someone looks at you twice, they're recognizing something archetypal in you. Something timeless and familiar, yet impossible to name. You might carry what Jung would call the wise woman or the mystic archetype. Someone who seems to know things without having learned them, who radiates an inner knowledge that others long for, but can't access. Or perhaps you embody the sage or the hermit, someone who has traveled inward and carries the treasures of that journey in their very being. These glances aren't random. They're soul recognizing soul. They're the unconscious mind saying, there's something here I need to understand. But because our culture has trained us to dismiss these subtle communications, most people don't know how to bridge that gap between recognition and connection. How many second glances do you receive? How many times do you catch someone watching you when they think you're not looking? These aren't accidents, they're acknowledgments of your depth, of the energy you carry that speaks to something ancient and true in others. If you're starting to recognize yourself in these signs, know that you're not alone in this journey of self-discovery. There's so much more to explore together, and I'm honored to be walking this path with you. Fourth expression, the magnet of care. You receive help without asking. This might be the most beautiful sign of unconscious attraction. People want to connect with your energy, but they don't know how to approach someone who seems so complete, so self-contained. So they help, they offer assistance. They remember small details about your life. They go out of their way to make your day easier. Jung understood that we're all seeking connection with the aspects of ourselves we've lost or never developed. When someone repeatedly helps you without being asked, they're trying to connect with the wholeness they sense in you. They're drawn to your self-sufficiency not because they want to take from it, but because they want to contribute to it. Consider Marcus, who noticed that baristas always seemed to remember his order, that strangers offered directions before he asked, that people held doors a little longer when he approached. He assumed he was lucky, but what he didn't realize was that his gentle presence made others want to be gentle in return. When Marcus walked into his neighborhood bookstore, the owner would save interesting books he thought Marcus might like. When he went grocery shopping, other customers would smile and let him go ahead in line. When he sat in the park reading, people would occasionally approach to ask about his book, drawn by the peaceful energy he radiated. This wasn't about Marcus being helpless or needy. Quite the opposite. It was about him carrying such a sense of inner contentment that others wanted to add to that contentment rather than take from it. His self-possession inspired generosity rather than exploitation. This kind of attraction goes beyond the physical or even the emotional. It's spiritual. It's the recognition of someone who has found a way to be at peace with themselves, and others want to be part of that peace. Start noticing all the small ways people care for you. The coworker who always remembers how you like your coffee. The neighbor who saves packages when you're not home. The friend who sends you articles they think you'd find interesting. This isn't coincidence. This is your energies creating ripples of kindness in the world. Fifth expression, the sacred silence. Comfortable silence doesn't drive people away. Most people fear silence. They fill it with words, with movement, with anything to avoid the depth that quiet brings. But around you, people stay. They settle into the silence like it's a warm bath. Jung knew that silence is where the soul speaks. Your comfort with quiet creates a sanctuary where others can finally rest from the exhausting performance of constant conversation. Think about how rare this is. In most social interactions, if the conversation lulls for more than a few seconds, someone rushes to fill the space. But when someone feels comfortable enough to be silent with you, when they don't feel the need to entertain or be entertained, that's when you know you've created something sacred. This is the highest level of attraction. Creating a space where people can simply be without explanation or entertainment. It's the attraction of depth, calling to depth, of one authentic being recognizing another. When you sit with someone in comfortable silence, you're offering them something precious. Permission to exist without performance. Permission to think their own thoughts, feel their own feelings, be their own person without needing to justify or explain. Next time you're with someone, Resist the urge to fill comfortable silences. Notice how they respond to the spaciousness you create. Do they relax? Do they seem to settle more deeply into themselves? This is what Jung called holding space. Creating room for others to discover who they are when they're not trying to be someone else. Sixth expression, the depth dilemma. You attract half-hearted relationships. This one might sting a little, but it's important. People are drawn to you, but they often don't know how to love you properly. They want to be close, but your depth intimidates them. So they hover, they almost commit. They give you pieces of themselves while holding back the rest. Jung would recognize this as the shadow of attraction. When you carry deep feminine or masculine energy, not everyone knows how to meet you there. They want what you offer, but they're afraid of what it might require of them. Your depth asks for depth in return. Your authenticity calls for authenticity. Your willingness to feel deeply invites others to feel deeply too. And for many people, that's terrifying. They've built their lives on surfaces, on small talk and safe emotions. When they encounter someone like you, someone who lives from a deeper place, they're both attracted and overwhelmed. They want to swim in your ocean, but they're afraid of drowning. This isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their capacity, and recognizing this can free you from taking their half-hearted love personally. Think of Elena, who found herself repeatedly in relationships with people who were fascinated by her depth, but ultimately unable to match it. They loved her intensity until it asked for intimacy. They were drawn to her emotional intelligence until it required emotional responsibility. They wanted her wisdom until it reflected their own areas of growth. Elena learned that this pattern wasn't about her being too much. It was about her attracting people who were drawn to what they hadn't developed in themselves, but who weren't ready to do the work of developing it. Notice where you've been accepting crumbs of affection. Your depth deserves to be met with depth, not feared. Your intensity deserves to be celebrated, not managed. Your authenticity deserves to be matched, not tolerated. Now we come to the heart of it all, the core truth that might be difficult to hear, but necessary to understand. What if the reason you don't feel attractive is because you've spent your entire life learning to shrink? Let's sit with this for a moment. Really feel it. You were 5 years old when you first learned that your feelings were too big. You were 8 when someone told you to use your inside voice, when you were just excited about sharing something you loved. You were 12 when you learned that caring deeply about things made other people uncomfortable. You were told you were too sensitive when you were just being real. You were interrupted when you tried to share your deeper thoughts. You were called intense when you simply cared deeply about things. You were labeled dramatic when you expressed the full range of human emotion. And so you learned. You learned to dim your light. You learned to speak softer, take up less space, need less, feel less, be less. You learned to apologize for your very existence, to make yourself smaller so others could feel bigger. Jung called this the shadow of self-worth. The parts of ourselves we've pushed down so deep that we've forgotten they even exist. We've buried our brightness so thoroughly that we no longer remember how to shine. Here's Anna's story, and maybe you'll recognize yourself in it. She grew up in a family that prized practicality above all else. When she shared her dreams of becoming an artist, she was told to be realistic. When she cried at movies, she was told she was too emotional. When she spoke passionately about things she cared about, she was told to calm down. Her father, well-meaning but emotionally unavailable, would say things like, "If you keep wearing your heart on your sleeve, people will take advantage of you." Her mother, overwhelmed by her own suppressed emotions, would respond to Anna's enthusiasm with, "Not everything is that important, sweetheart." By the time she reached adulthood, Anna had learned to exist in a perpetual state of apology for taking up space. She wore muted colors, spoke in careful, measured tones, and constantly asked others if she was too much. She had internalized the message that her natural way of being was somehow wrong, excessive, inappropriate. But something interesting happened. Even in her diminished state, people were drawn to her. They sought her out for advice. They lingered in conversations with her. They remembered things she said months later. They felt safe telling her their secrets. They found themselves being more honest around her than they were with anyone else. Anna couldn't see it, but others could sense the fire she was working so hard to contain. Her attempts to be small only made her authentic nature more apparent by contrast. Like a lamp covered with a thin cloth, her light was still visible, just filtered through the veil of her conditioning. The shadow Jung spoke of isn't just what we hide from others, it's what we hide from ourselves. And sometimes, our greatest power lives in that shadow, waiting for us to reclaim it. You've been taught that being attractive means being palatable, easy to digest, comfortable for others to be around. You've learned to modulate your voice, dim your excitement, soften your opinions, and shrink your dreams to fit into spaces that were never meant to contain someone like you. But what if your real attraction lives in your refusal to be diminished? What if the very sensitivity you've been taught to suppress is exactly what draws people to you? What if your intensity isn't a flaw to be managed, but a gift to be celebrated? What if you've been magnificent all along, and the only thing standing between you and recognizing it is your own disbelief? This moment of recognition can be tender. If you're feeling something shift inside you as we explore this together, trust that feeling. Your soul recognizes truth when it hears it. Here's what I want you to understand, gently, lovingly, completely. You don't need to be chosen to be attractive. You have always been attractive, in your own quiet, undeniable way. Let's separate attraction from all the external measures we've been taught to value. The likes on social media, the compliments from strangers, the pursuit from others, the validation that comes and goes like weather, leaving you feeling dependent on forces outside your control. True attraction, the kind Jung understood, comes from something much deeper and more stable. It comes from your unhurried gaze when everyone else is rushing. It comes from your unexplained presence in a room full of performance. It comes from your comfortable silence in a world that never stops talking. It comes from your willingness to feel deeply in a culture that promotes numbness. Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, rather than who you think you should be. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more you become yourself, the more attractive you become. Not because you're trying to attract anyone, but because authenticity is magnetic. Think about the people you're most drawn to in life. Bet they're not the ones who are trying the hardest to be appealing. They're the ones who seem most comfortable in their own skin, most present in their own lives, most unapologetic about taking up the space they're meant to occupy. Your attractiveness lives in your willingness to be affected by beauty, in your capacity to feel deeply in a world that's becoming increasingly numb, in your refusal to harden your heart even when it's been broken, in your commitment to remaining open even when openness has led to pain. It lives in the way you listen, not just to respond, but to truly hear, in the way you see people, not just their surface presentation, but their hidden longings and secret fears, in the way you hold space for others to be imperfect, struggling, beautifully human. Jung understood that we're all walking around with parts of ourselves that we've disowned, and when someone meets us in our wholeness, when they see and accept the parts we've learned to hide, that creates a bond that goes beyond physical attraction. It creates recognition, soul calling to soul. Here's David's story. He was an accountant who believed he was utterly unremarkable. Quiet, methodical, preferring spreadsheets to small talk. He couldn't understand why his co-workers always seemed to gravitate toward his desk for quick questions that turned into long conversations. David would describe himself as boring, but what he didn't realize was that his calm presence in their chaotic office created a kind of sanctuary. His unhurried attention made people feel heard in a way they rarely experienced. His gentle humor provided relief from the constant pressure they all felt. His steady energy became an anchor in their storm. When the office was buzzing with deadline stress, people would find excuses to walk by David's cubicle just to absorb some of his tranquility. When conflicts arose between departments, somehow David became the unofficial mediator, not because he inserted himself into drama, but because his presence made everyone else behave more rationally. David wasn't trying to be attractive. He was just being himself, steady, thoughtful, present. And in a world of people performing their lives, his authenticity was like cool water in a desert. The greatest attraction comes from your willingness to stop performing and start existing, to stop trying to be someone else's idea of appealing and start being your own idea of whole. For the next week, experiment with radical authenticity. Say what you really think, kindly. Wear what actually makes you feel like yourself. Move at your own pace instead of trying to match others' energy. Let your natural expressions emerge without editing them for palatability. Notice what happens when you stop trying to be attractive and start being real. Jung believed that the goal of life isn't to be perfect, it's to be whole. And wholeness, my friend, is irresistible. Wholeness contains both light and shadow, both strength and vulnerability, both certainty and doubt. Wholeness doesn't perform itself. It simply exists, and in that existence, it becomes magnetic. So here we are, at the end of this exploration, but really at the beginning of something new, the beginning of seeing yourself as you truly are, rather than as you've been taught to believe you are. Next time you wonder if you're attractive, and you will wonder because that's human, ask yourself this: why do they come back? Even when you never called? Why do conversations linger when you're part of them? Why do people remember things you said months ago? Why do strangers smile at you for no apparent reason? Why do people seem to soften in your presence? Why do they share their secrets with you? Why do they seek your opinion on things that matter to them? It's not because you're performing attraction, it's because you're being yourself so completely that others remember what it feels like to be real. Jung knew something our culture has forgotten. The most powerful presence is often the quietest one. The most magnetic people are those who have stopped trying to be magnetic and started being authentic. Your attraction doesn't come from having it all figured out. It comes from your willingness to not have it all figured out, and to be graceful with that uncertainty. It comes from your ability to sit with questions rather than rushing toward answers. It comes from your capacity to be comfortable with mystery, including the mystery of your own being. It doesn't come from being confident all the time. It comes from being real all the time, even when real includes doubt, fear, and vulnerability. Even when real means admitting you don't know what you're doing. Even when real means letting others see you in your unguarded moments. It doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being present. Present to your own experience. Present to others' experience. Present to the moment as it unfolds, without trying to control or manipulate it into something else. Your attractiveness is not separate from your struggles. It includes them. It's not separate from your wounds. It's often revealed through them. It's not separate from your imperfections. It's enhanced by your humanity. When you stop hiding your scars and start wearing them as evidence of your resilience, you become magnetic. When you stop apologizing for your depth and start trusting it as wisdom, you become irresistible. When you stop dimming your light to make others comfortable and start shining at full brightness, you become a beacon for others who are ready to shine too. Let me leave you with this thought, a gentle whisper for your soul to carry. True attraction is when you don't need permission to shine, when you don't need approval to exist, when you don't need to be chosen to know your own worth. You are already whole. You are already enough. You are already attractive in ways that can't be measured or compared or taken away. The world doesn't need another person trying to be appealing. It needs you, being completely, unapologetically, beautifully yourself. It needs your particular brand of sensitivity, your unique way of seeing, your specific gifts, your irreplaceable presence. Because that's when the magic happens. That's when you realize you were never broken to begin with. You were just waiting for permission to remember who you've always been. Tonight, before you sleep, place your hand on your heart and say, I don't need to be chosen. I am already whole. My presence is a gift to the world, exactly as I am. Feel the truth of those words settling into your bones. Let them rewire the old programming that told you to be less than you are. And then, tomorrow, live like you believe it. Not because someone told you to, but because somewhere deep inside, you're starting to remember that it's true. Your journey to recognizing your own magnetism isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering someone you've always been, but forgot you had permission to be. And that person, that authentic, unguarded, beautifully real person who carries depth like a treasure and sensitivity like a superpower. Until next time, they are absolutely, undeniably, irresistibly attractive.